So by the mid part of the 17th century, the English had established themselves pretty well in the Jamestown area, but they still weren't in complete control. The natives still had a significant amount of control, and the English still had to deal with them like a foreign power, even though they were considerably diminished, at least in the area, in the close to the immediate seaboard. So the English were down here in Chesapeake Bay area, so that area of Eastern Virginia between Richmond and Washington, D.C., where those places are now. The other Europeans to be settling this part of North America were the French and the Dutch, France and Netherlands. So the French trade regime became more and more prominent by the 17th century. They made some permanent settlements and they attempted to Christianize some of the natives in the area. But the French generally didn't try to just take over, and so that helped reduce the amount of wars they were in. So the English, as we just seen, they showed up within a year or two, they're at war with the natives. That wasn't so much the case with the French. At least the wars were less frequent as a result of their not attempting to just conquer the land. Instead, the French incorporated the natives as a kind of partner, a subordinate partner to be sure, but they did look at them as partners in their efforts to expand their mercantile empire. And so how the French looked at the natives in the area up here where they were settling along the St. Lawrence River, how the French looked at those natives were that these are our agents who are doing our work for us that we can then make money off of. That resulted in a strange blending of European and native rivalries. So, because it changed the politics of the natives considerably. For at least 2 centuries prior to contact, the Huron and the Iroquois, so the natives who lived on kind of either side of the St. Lawrence River here, the Huron and the Iroquois Confederacy, they didn't really like each other. They had been in a rivalry. These were 2 rival powers who lived on either side of Lake Ontario. France acted to strengthen the position of its favored trade partners. So Samuel de Champlain, who we've mentioned a little bit before, a French explorer and trader, he established a military post at the site, what had been the site of Stadacona. And in 1609 and 1610, he took French and allied native soldiers on an expedition to fight some Mohawk, part of the Iroquois Confederacy, some Mohawk war parties on what became Lake Champlain, which is in northern New York or Vermont near the Canadian border. And the Richelieu River. Iroquois warriors, until then, had been pretty much invincible. They had been the military power in the region because they had these wooden shields that would block arrows. But the French brought firearms with them, and that changed the game. After that, what Champlain realized was that the best strategy was to ingratiate himself with certain natives by fighting on their behalf. And that would cause them to reciprocate more and basically give them their trade goods for a cheaper price, essentially. So Champlain and his troops joined Huron war parties against an Oneida Iroquois village in 1615, and by the 1620s, the Huron had extended their power with French help. And the Huron by that point, had taken over some Iroquois hunting territory and had expanded into this region of what's now kind of northwestern New York, and using the French weapons to try to push the Iroquois southward. And as a result, were sending to the French, who were then sending to Europe, between 12,000 and 20,000 fur pelts per year. In exchange, the French traders offered the Huron all kinds of goods: metal knives, axes, hatchets, arrowheads, kettles, glass beads, and guns. Anything they could use to bargain with. That stuff just flooded the native markets. So they used those French goods and their own corn supply to trade for furs with other natives further inland, such as the Ottawa there. So those neighbors traded with even more distant communities as far north as the Hudson Bay and as far west as Lake Superior. And so pretty soon the Huron had an enormous trading empire of their own. This is what some Huron traditional clothing would have looked like. And they would have blended it pretty quickly with European goods. So you can see this guy here. He has the hatchet and the musket, and representing the blending of the cultures that occurred. So by the 1630s, what the French started thinking is acquiescence to our culture. And so they started sending missionaries to try to Christianize the Huron. That caused a smallpox epidemic among them, which, along with measles and influenza, reduced their population by more than half. The Hurons blamed those Jesuit missionaries for their diseases and forced them out, or tried to force them out, but the French demanded that at least some of them remain in order to continue trading, and the Huron by the 1630s were dependent on those French trade goods. So the Hurons believed that that hostile spiritual forces caused disease, and so there was a movement to try to push all the Europeans out, but that kind of caused almost a civil war among them because so many people were now dependent on European products. What that did, the stress inside the society, at the same time they're having diseases go on, was that they were further split among themselves. And so the Huron who did Christianize, who did accept the mission of those missionaries and convert to Christianity, they became the favored natives with the French, and they were the ones who would get first access and most access to all the weapons and the metal goods and so forth, which would give them a significant advantage in any dispute that would turn from cold to hot. So that caused significant division in the Huron society.